Today we're going to be talking about the Garden of Eden and where it could possibly have been located. This is one of the greatest mysteries in the church, one of the greatest mysteries in church history, and I am really excited to talk about it because, and this is just spoiler alert, we'll get into this in more detail, but the general idea is that it is in modern day Iraq. And I'll go into why and all the reasons behind that, the history behind that, and why it may not be in modern day Iraq. But that is the general consensus, is that it is in modern day Iraq, which is very dear to my heart because I direct a missions organization called Found Ministries, and we work in a lot of unreached places. And I spent 2 years of my life in Turkey whenever I was younger, and which is next to Iraq. And now I have been to Iraq several times and ministered there. I've been able to go to Nahum's tomb and supposedly Nahum's tomb, Ezekiel's tomb, the town where the wise men came from whenever they visited Jesus when he was born. I got to look at the plains of Nineveh from the mountains where Jonah would have sat. I've been able to go to all over these places in Iraq, and it's places very, very dear to my heart. My heart, I absolutely love it. So we get to talk a little bit about Iraq and the Middle East, and so I'm super excited about it. Now, I'm going to read this to you. This is from Genesis that talks about the Garden of Eden because God does give some directions whenever in Genesis, whenever he created the Garden of Eden. He gives some little clues as to where it might have been. So this comes from Genesis chapter 2, verses 8 through 14, and it says this: The Lord planted a garden eastward in Eden. Now a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it parted and became four riverheads. The name of the first is Pishon, the name of the second river is Gihon, and the name of the third river is Tigris. The fourth river is the Euphrates. Now, if you look at a map, you can see of modern day Iraq, you can see that there is in fact a river named the Euphrates and a river named the Tigris River. Now, if you go to that place, you'll find there's no Garden of Eden there. It's Iraq. There's deserts and mountains, and it's a pretty dry place, and dangerous now after Saddam Hussein left all those land. He left millions of landmines everywhere. That's a whole other thing. But it's a very dangerous place, and a very dry place. So if you go there, you wouldn't think, well, this is where the Garden of Eden is, right? Now, I find it fascinating because here's my theory. There has been so much of Bible history that has taken place in Iraq. The Tower of Babel was there. Again, I mentioned all of these other prophets were all there. There was a lot of really powerful ministry that took place. Babylon was there. This is where Daniel and the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego would have been. There are a lot of really amazing moments of Bible history that happened there. And the fact that there are two rivers there, it would make sense to think that the Garden of Eden could have originally been in that place. A lot of people, and I believe that this is pretty well alluded to in Scripture, that after the fall, that God took the garden, just like he took the Ark of the Covenant, right? The Bible talks about the Ark of the Covenant being in heaven. I believe that God took Eden and he took it to heaven as well. After the fall, he put the angel there. It makes sense to me. I can't show that. There's no verse in Scripture that specifically says the Garden of Eden is now in heaven. That's just my theory. Let me know what your theory is. I'd love to hear it. But I will say this. In terms of where it actually was located, there are several different theories. One of the theories is that what is modern day, it's if you look at different articles or you talk to different scholars, you're going to get different areas of modern day Iraq. Some people would say it's more in the northeastern Iraq. Some say southeast. So generally speaking, it's in the eastern area of Iraq. But as for the exact location, nobody really knows, because even if the current Tigris and Euphrates rivers, even if those are the rivers from Genesis that are mentioned here in the book of Genesis, even if those are the original rivers, we're talking about rivers that are thousands of years old. And rivers do change. Land erodes, rivers can shift, and over thousands of years, those rivers could be in wildly different positions than they were whenever Genesis happened, right? They could be in completely different areas of Iraq. They could have moved lots of different places. So that is one thing, is you can't really go to where they connect right now and say this is where the Garden of Eden was, because they very likely have moved just through natural erosion of land. The other thing to take into consideration, which I find this fascinating whenever I read different scholars, John Calvin, for example, he really struggled. Now, I'm not a Calvinist, but this is something that John Calvin, he did a lot for the church that was really, really impressive, and he also did some very bad things. But in his commentary on Genesis chapter 2, John Calvin, he goes through his own thought process of why it's so difficult to pinpoint exactly where the original Garden of Eden was, and he goes through talking about how much controversy there is, and how the Pishon and the Gihon, they believe that they are actually the Ganges and the Nile River, which we're talking now Africa and India. We're talking about all these different locations, and how complicated all of that is. But at the end of it all, I won't read the whole thing because it's a long commentary. But at the end of it, his sort of conclusion, and this is where I want to get to, he says, from this difficulty, some would free themselves by saying that the surface of the globe may have been changed by the flood. Now that is absolutely key, because we do have to take that into account. Whenever Noah got on the ark and the flood happened, the whole world was split up. The whole face of the earth changed. There hadn't been rain before Noah came. The world, in essence, well, not in essence, the world was basically, I don't want to say all land, but it was largely land. There was much more land on the earth than there is now. And when the flood happened and the ground broke open, that's why we have all of those faults, right? That's why we have all of the volcanoes and all of the land and its waviness, however you want to call it, the mountain ranges, all that, is because of land being pushed up and the deep being opened up and water gushing out, and then the rain coming, and the whole face of the earth completely changed during the flood. And so if the whole face of the earth changed, we don't know, maybe the whole continents moved. And so the original location of the Garden of Eden, sure, it may possibly still be in eastern Iraq, but it is also just as likely that that entire area shifted to a completely different place. The mountain ranges were created, and a whole different, whenever Noah got off the ark, it would have been an entirely different view. Everything would have been completely different than it is today, than it was in the Garden of Eden. Either way, today and the Garden of Eden, because the face of the earth changes, right? Because of just nature. And so Noah, whenever he got onto the ark, he probably could have told you where the original Garden of Eden was. Noah probably knew, because that would have been passed down generation to generation. And then whenever the ark lands and he gets off, and there's Mount Ararat, and there's all these different new things all around him, chances are the original location was completely lost. I mean, it could be under the ocean right now. We don't know. The other thing, and this is a good point made by some scholars, the other thing about the Garden of Eden is whenever Noah got off the ark, he then would have probably started renaming places, right? He would have known the names of these rivers, and it is very possible that he or some of his descendants, whenever they went into eastern Iraq, and Mount Ararat, that's a whole other thing. Currently, the belief is that Mount Ararat is in eastern Turkey, and it's believed that Noah's Ark is on there still. Maybe I'll do an episode on that and talk about if Noah's Ark is actually there or not. Like I said, I lived in Turkey for 2 years. It's pretty fascinating, that whole story about Noah's Ark on Mount Ararat. I might do another episode on that. Regardless of that, as people started to travel out and they were finding new rivers and naming new rivers, new oceans, new mountains, it's very, very possible that someone came upon the Euphrates and the Tigris, and they were just rivers that they found as they were traveling, and they just said, essentially, hey, let's name this the Tigris and the Euphrates, because that was the name of rivers that maybe in their mind they were like, well, this is the general area that we know that those rivers were, or maybe they just found them and said, hey, it's two rivers connecting. Our ancestors had two rivers that connected. Let's call them the Tigris and the Euphrates in honor. I mean, we have, right, New York, which is named after York. We have New Hampshire, named after Hampshire. All these different things. It's very common practice to name things after something from a long time ago. So it's really, truly a mystery as to where Eden is today. Like I said, I believe it's probably been taken to heaven, and we'll get to enjoy it. If you believe in Jesus, you'll get to enjoy it whenever you get to heaven. But if not, it is certainly lost. There's no Garden of Eden in the world today. Uh, I personally, just bringing this full circle, I think that it is very likely in eastern Iraq. I do believe that. And the reason why I believe that is because that whole area has been such an epicenter of moves of God and the prophets, and sort of a contention of the people of God with the people of the world for so long that it makes a lot of sense to me that it would be in that place. A lot of people believe that it's in Africa, that it was originally in Ethiopia. As a matter of fact, there's a place in Ethiopia right now that they claim they have the Ark of the Covenant. I don't believe that. I really believe that because the Ark of the Covenant completely disappeared. I believe that God took it to heaven because I believe that Scripture talks about it. Again, I could do another episode on that. But it is, regardless, it is a mystery that we're not going to know for a long time. So thank you for joining me in this episode. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. And I'm going to be producing a lot more content like this. Let me know if there's something you would like to learn about or you'd like to discuss, and I'll be happy to make a video on it. See you in the next one.